Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the RDX Sports Podcast. I'm Simon Head, and we have a big pay-per-view event this weekend in Chicago, Illinois. UFC 319 is coming our way. Only one title fight on this fight card, which is a little bit of a departure from the norm. Normally we get two on a UFC pay-per-view, but boy, what a title fight it is. We will break down that title fight on this week's episode of the RDX Sports Podcast. But even though we've only got the one title fight on that main card is packed with entertaining, fan-friendly fights. We'll give you the lowdown on each and every one of those. But before we launch into UFC 319, big news from the UFC. Just earlier today, it was announced that Paramount have done a huge broadcast deal with the UFC in the United States, $7.7 billion over the next 7 years to be the exclusive home of the UFC's numbered events and fight night events. Now, the phraseology is important here. The UFC's numbered events, they're not going to be pay-per-views anymore. Pay-per-views are going away as of 2026. Huge news if you're in the United States, where for every time there's a numbered UFC pay-per-view event, you're able to fork out in the region of about $70 for a show on top of your ESPN Plus subscription. So big news if you're a UFC fan in the States. It should, fingers crossed, hopefully mean that it is a cheaper sport to watch. Mixed martial arts will hopefully become a cheaper sport to watch, particularly if you're just focusing on the UFC. UFC itself as a product should be a cheaper product to watch, all sitting under that Paramount banner. So what it means is Paramount Plus will become the home of the UFC from a streaming perspective in the United States, but they have the option of broadcasting the live events on CBS, on the linear TV over there in the States. It sounds like they're going to carry a lot of what were the pay-per-view shows. I don't know whether we're going to call them PLEs like we do with WWE. The former pay-per-views from WWE are now called premium live events, PLEs, just to differentiate them from the weekly Raw and SmackDown shows and the house shows and all that sort of stuff that they do. What we're going to call these, at the moment, they're just being called numbered shows. They've always been pay-per-view. The UFC's business started as a one-off pay-per-view event, UFC 1, in Denver, Colorado, back in the day. And it's been pay-per-views all the way for those numbered events going through. That now comes to an end. And for a Brit, we're used to having a little bit of pay-per-view, but not to the degree that they have pay-per-view in the United States, and not to the cost either. Like if we get a pay-per-view in the UK, like for example, here in the UK with the UFC deal we have with TNT Sports, which now streams on Discovery Plus here in the UK, occasionally we get a pay-per-view. Normally that's if Tom Aspinall is in the main event, or Leon Edwards, when he was champion, was in the main event or fighting for the title. Conor McGregor fights were sometimes put on pay-per-view, and the really big ticket showpiece tentpole events, UFC 300, if I remember correctly, that may well have been a pay-per-view as well. But we're talking 20 quid, £20, £25 for a pay-per-view over here in the UK. Different ball game over in the States, sort of $70-80 for a pay-per-view. That's a lot of money. And when you've got one every month, that starts to rack up, plus all the other streaming expenses that you have to incur. If you're at home with a family, you've got all these other streaming platforms as well. It's an expensive business to be a UFC fan. It looks like this new deal is going to make it a little bit cheaper and a little bit easier to be a fan of the UFC and to catch everything, because it sounds to me like we're going to have 30 fight night shows, 11 pay-per-views or numbered shows, however you want to call it, per year on the under the Paramount banner, basically. So if you've got a subscription to Paramount, you can watch everything, and that's incredible. Now, we don't know what that means for things like the Contender Series, which will be a separate deal, whether that also comes in under the Paramount banner in a separate mini deal, or whether they look to farm that out somewhere else, whether they want to keep their toes in the ESPN water and give it to them, whether they want to go down a different streamer, such as Netflix or something like that. We'll see. I know a lot of people, including me, thought that the UFC were going to end up on Netflix and kind of follow the WWE approach. And it's all part of TKO at the end of the day, WWE and UFC, all under that TKO umbrella. But Paramount have come in. They've just been purchased by a company called Skydance. A lot of money involved, and they clearly want to make a splash. They clearly want to beef up their streaming product. In the States, they already carry Champions League football. Now they're going to carry the UFC as well. So big moves in the media rights space stateside. How does that affect us over here in the UK? Immediately? It doesn't really, but it might do in the not too distant future when TNT Sports rights are up, which might be the end of this year. I'm not 100% sure, but I understand from what I'm hearing that this deal from Paramount includes an exclusive negotiating period for all of the international rights as they become available. So, for example, when the TNT Sports rights expire at the end of that contract, it sounds like Paramount are going to have first dibs on negotiations. So, if they get in there, offer a suitable deal for the UFC can just say, "Okay, we're going to plug the UK rights straight into this Paramount deal. Paramount Plus, obviously available here in the UK. You need a subscription to Paramount Plus." So you get to watch the UFC on the Paramount Plus platform. But we shall see. We shall see how this all pans out, because we don't have a linear Paramount platform here in the UK, whereas in the US you've got CBS, which is obviously a massive network across the entirety of the United States. It's a different kind of landscape, but we are much more streaming-led now. Having that linear TV presence isn't as important as it once was. TNT Sports has a linear TV presence through, it used to be BT Sport. I was part of that team that launched BT Sport and launched the UFC's coverage. I was running the digital coverage of UFC for BT Sport when it very first started. And it's gone on and expanded massively. There's been a lot more investment internally into the coverage of UFC, far, far greater than when I was there, which was amazing to see. And they've done such a great job through being the BT Sport, and then obviously once it's the rebrand into TNT Sports and being part of that Warner Brothers Discovery family. They've done such a good job with the UFC. It'll be very interesting to see how that changes, if that changes, when their rights deal comes to an end, because it looks like Paramount are ready to swoop and potentially snatch up as many of these international rights as possible and become not just a streaming giant in the United States, but to really own the UFC landscape in terms of broadcast across the globe. Wherever Paramount has a footprint, they're probably going to want to snatch up those rights. So that's one to look out for as we get a little bit further down the line. But an absolutely huge piece of news. Came a little bit out of left field. I don't think many people were expecting Paramount to actually win out and take these rights. I think the smart money was on Netflix. There were some that thought that maybe all of this was a way of just pushing the price up for ESPN and it'd end up with ESPN again. No. A brand new partnership for the UFC with Paramount Plus, or the Paramount platform. Absolutely huge payday for the UFC. Pay-per-views going away. And it'd be really interesting to see how they format these events for the slightly different format of broadcast with regards to being on the Paramount platform and possibly on CBS moving forward. But I think for the fans, it's great news. For the fighters, potentially it means that the big ticket shows could be seen by even more people. So we'll see how all this goes. But from a financial standpoint, an absolutely massive deal for the UFC. Presumably the guys at Paramount can see a route to profit and a return on investment with this deal. They're obviously going to expect the entire MMA fan base of the United States to dive in and get a Paramount Plus subscription just as a basic start off, right? So we'll see how this all goes. A lot of money has been invested. This is a big moment for Paramount and a big deal for the UFC. $7.7 billion over the next 7 years for live rights of the UFC. So what that means is pay-per-views are now an endangered species when it comes to the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And we've basically got one a month pretty much till the end of the year, one of which taking place this weekend in Chicago, Illinois, the United Center, playing host to UFC 319. And boy, do we have a good main event for you, ladies and gentlemen. Dricus Du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev for the undisputed middleweight championship of the world. The irresistible force versus the immovable object at 185 pounds. Khamzat Chimaev, all gas, no brakes. Dricus Du Plessis, just the most relentless middleweight on the planet. Just seems like a zombie at times. You just cannot slow the man down. Khamzat Chimaev is just a bullet from a gun when he gets in there. So really looking forward to seeing how this bout meshes together. Stylistically, it has all the ingredients. I put it on socials earlier today. It has all the ingredients for being the title fight, or one of the top title fights of 2025. Take a look at Khamzat Chimaev. He's 14-0. 14-0. Only 2 of those 14 fights have made it to the judges' scorecards. That was a majority decision win over Kamaru Usman, former welterweight champion. At middleweight, back at UFC 294, Usman coming in on short notice to take that fight. The other one was a decision against Gilbert Burns at UFC 273. That was an absolute banger of a fight as well. I'm going to refer to those 2 fights in a little bit when we talk about how I think this fight's going to pan out, because I think those 2 fights may hold the key to how this fight might pan out on Saturday night. But most recently, he went in there with the former middleweight champion of the world, Robert Whittaker, UFC 308, and crushed him. Literally crushed him. Face cranked, dislocated his jaw. The photos of Robert Whittaker's lower jaw circulated around social media like wildfire after that fight. And it was not a pretty sight, let me tell you. It was absolutely horrible to look at. And that just shows you the sort of grappling strength and crushing power that Khamzat Chimaev has. If he gets you to the mat and takes you back, if he can't choke you, he'll just crush your jaw until you have no option but to tap. That was the performance of the night fight for Khamzat Chimaev, unsurprisingly, back at UFC 308. That was October 2024. Haven't seen him since then. Now he's getting in there for his 15th pro fight. Can he go 15-0 against Dricus Du Plessis? Du Plessis his story is an incredible one, really. I mean, he came up through EFC. He was champion in EFC at welterweight and won the middleweight belt in EFC shortly after. Became a 2-division champion, in EFC. Then joins KSW, the Polish promotion, a great Polish promotion. Immediately challenges Roberto Soldic. Pound for pound, probably the hardest puncher in mixed martial arts for MMA. At KSW 43. Knocks out or stops Roberto Soldic for punches to capture the welterweight title. He makes a huge splash straight away in KSW. Then they come over to London, a fight that I was fortunate enough to be at for the rematch, where Roberto Soldic knocked out Dricus Du Plessis in the 3rd round to regain that title. But that was an absolute war for as long as it lasted. But let's not make any bones about it. He was in there with, as I say, one of the toughest, hardest punchers pound for pound in the sport. Also, he was really killing himself to make 170 pounds. I do not know how he made 170 pounds. You look at him now, it looks like a physical impossibility that this man could ever fight at 170 pounds short of removing one of his limbs. It is pretty insane. And he looked as lean as hell in those fights as well. He immediately moved back up to middleweight, beat Jolson Santos before eventually departing the promotion and joining the UFC in 2020. Since then, it's been victories all the way for Dricus Du Plessis. You take a look at some of the names. We'll spin through a few, but then we get to Brad Tavares, Darren Till, Derek Brunson, Robert Whittaker, stopped him with strikes in the 2nd round. Sean Strickland for the title, beaten by split decision. Some called it controversial. I didn't think it was enormously controversial. I thought it was a super close fight. People were calling for a rematch. In the meantime, they did the fight, the money fight that needed to be done. Him versus Israel Adesanya. No one really gave him a chance of beating Izzy. He went toe to toe with Izzy and made his striking count in a fight where he was considered to be completely outgunned stylistically from a stand-up striking perspective. made sure he landed his shots really well, and eventually submitted Israel Adesanya face crank 4th round in Perth, Australia, to defend that middleweight title. He then got the rematch with Sean Strickland, and a now infamous fight. I think anybody who watches that fight or saw that fight live will remember how that all panned out. Du Plessis was completely dominant. Strickland seemed to completely deviate from the game plan, and just was almost like a zombie in there towards the end of the fight. Just didn't really have anything to change the tune really, and was completely and utterly dominated by Du Plessis. That was back in February this year in Sydney. 2 title defenses on the board for Dricus Du Plessis. This will be the 3rd if he can get it done. But wow, what a fight this is. You look at Khamzat Chimaev, the way he pushes the pace in his fights, comes out, as I say, like a bullet from a gun, and looks to get things done very quickly. And, I don't think it's any surprise that he comes flying out of his corner now and looks to do things quickly, but very few people have been able to stop him. And then he gets you down, he either takes you back and finishes you, or he just mounts you and just smashes you to pieces. They are your options at that point. Can he do that against Dricus Du Plessis? He is the betting favourite in this fight, and a relatively big one as well, which I shouldn't be surprised by, because Du Plessis is routinely underappreciated and routinely disrespected by the odds makers at times. Stylistically, you look at him and you think, wow, there's holes in his game. An elite striker would pick him apart. Israel Adesanya didn't. You would think, oh, okay, maybe someone can take advantage of that. That sort of winging striking and take him down and dominate him on the mat. Well, no one's able to do that either. So we'll see how this one pans out. And then for me, it comes down to one question that is the fulcrum point of this fight. If you've got the seesaw there, the fulcrum point in the middle is, can DDP get through the first 2 rounds? If he can get through the first 2 rounds, I think the fight falls very, very, very strongly in his favour, because Chimaev is very, very powerful, very strong, all gas, no brakes, but that gas tank is not a bottomless one. And we saw it against Kamaru Usman. We saw it against Gilbert Burns, where if you can keep the fight upright, or if you can avoid trouble when the fight does go to the mat, and just keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back, like Kamaru Usman did, like Gilbert Burns did, things get a little bit tricky for Khamzat Chimaev. He did enough to beat both of those guys and got immense credit for it, and deservedly so. But the final few rounds in those fights look very, very different to the fights that we see him in early on in those fights, where he is all one-way traffic. If Dricus Du Plessis gets through those first 2 rounds, then I think this is the champion's fight to win. I really do. I think that Du Plessis is bigger, stronger, tougher, hits harder than, with all due respect to them, than both Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman. He's a naturally bigger man. He's a naturally stronger man. The question will be his takedown defense. If he can be on point from a takedown defense point of view, and can make sure he isn't spending too long on his back, then this could be a hell of a fight as it goes into the later rounds. Will it be Dricus Du Plessis, or will it be Khamzat Chimaev? We're going to find out together on Saturday night, but it's going to be an absolute banger from start to finish. All right, as we said, there is no second championship fight on this fight card at UFC 319, but we have a really, really good co-main event fight here. A fight that potentially could be a championship eliminator in the featherweight division. We have England's Lerone Murphy, undefeated, taking on Aaron Pico, making his UFC debut, Bellator star, a man who has had a roller coaster of an MMA career already, but is now approaching his peak years, or is probably in his peak years right now, riding a win streak, heading into the UFC, looking to make an instant impact. And he's got the chance to hand one of the most difficult contenders to face in that featherweight division his first ever defeat. We'll see how this one goes. It's going to be a cracker. Aaron Pico, of course, through Bellator, 13-4 in his Bellator career. If you remember early on, arrived with a load of hype. His collegiate wrestling abilities were talked through the roof. And I think it was Daniel Cormier. Was it Daniel Cormier? I heard this week said that Aaron Pico is this good. If he'd stayed in amateur wrestling, he would be an Olympic champion by now. And to come from someone like Daniel Cormier, that is high praise indeed. So that gives you an idea of his wrestling credentials. But his boxing is outstanding as well. He's got really, really tight, crisp boxing. Marry those two things together, that's a pretty irresistible combination. His UFC debut, his MMA debut did not go well. He got subbed in 24 seconds on his professional MMA debut. That dampened down the hype just a little bit. He went on a win streak, then got stopped by Henry Corrales, stopped by Adam Boris, and it was like, okay. Is this guy just one of those, a case of like just a lot of potential that's not quite fulfilled? Basically, they threw him to the wolves a little bit too quickly. They had a bit of a reset on his career, teaming up with Jackson Winklejohn up there in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And they slow played him from that point on. Incremental improvements. And he built like a 6-fight win streak. Eventually lost to Jeremy Kennedy. But that was just via injury. He'd injured his shoulder in that fight. So, yes, it's a defeat, but it's not a loss, I think, from a mental standpoint. It was just an unfortunate incident in that fight at Bellator 286 in California. Since then, he's gone on to win 3 more, with his most recent 2, both ending via first-round TKO. Pedro Carvalho at Bellator 299, and against the guy who handed him his first knockout loss, Henry Corrales. He stops him in the first round at lightweight at PFL versus Bellator back in February 2024. Since then, his contract with the PFL was up, or it needed renegotiating, I think. There were all sorts of issues involved. Eventually, he managed to get released. He got his release from the PFL. Immediately joins the UFC. There was a rumor that he might even be thrown in there with Movsar Evloev. That fight did not happen. Now he's in there with probably the other guy in that welterweight division who is considered an absolute nightmare to fight. There's 2 guys in that in that featherweight division who I don't think anybody really wants to get in there and fight. Evloev is one of them, and I think Lerone Murphy is the other one, because they're both undefeated. They both manage their bouts incredibly well. They are technically superb in all facets of the game, and it's very, very difficult to get any kind of edge on either of them in any facet. So, taking a look at Lerone Murphy, undefeated in 17 fights, 16 wins, 1 draw. That draw was against Zubaira Tukhugov on his UFC debut, a split draw, a highly dubious one, to be honest. It was in Abu Dhabi. I smelt a little bit of iffiness insofar as I don't understand how that fight was scored as a draw. To me, watching the fight live at the time, I thought Lerone had won that fight 2-1. It was a split decision draw. So that is literally the only minor blemish on his record. Since then, it's been wins all the way. Ricardo Ramos, he stopped with TKO. Douglas Silva de Andrade, decision. Makwan Amirkhani, knockout. Since then, after that, it's been decisions all the way. Gabriel Santos, Josh Kulabel, Edson Barbosa, as he moves up in competition, outpointed Edson Barbosa in a main event in Las Vegas, and fight of the night bonus for that as well. Then they put him in with Dan Ige, who will give anybody a good fight. He outpointed him over 3 rounds in Abu Dhabi. Then they put him in with arguably the hardest hitter in the division in Josh Emmett, and he did a great job with him as well. 5 rounds, unanimous decision. Still unbeaten, and still a problem for anybody in the division. The Manchester top team man, Lerone Murphy. He's taking on Aaron Pico. I'm fascinated by this matchup. I'm also really interested that the betting odds have Lerone Murphy as the underdog going into this fight, insofar as this is Aaron Pico's first fight in the UFC. We know what often happens with fighters when they make their UFC debut. The Octagon jitters. Sounds like a made-up thing. Look back through history, even the big guys, even the biggest names when they first step into the Octagon, doesn't always go their way on their debuts. Sometimes those little wobbles come in, even people who've come in from Bellator. You look at Patricio Pitbull. long-time champion of Bellator, a guy who probably the best fighter in Bellator history, has been in there with a who's who, has fought at UFC championship level pretty much most of his career. He's that good. Steps into the Octagon, didn't perform anywhere near his best. These big UFC nights can sometimes get the better of you. So we'll see how Pico does on fight night. Not only is this his first fight in the UFC, it's his first fight in more than a year and a half. He's been away for a long time, and not through any fault of his. He's been trying to get fights, he just hasn't been able to get one. Eventually, it was fighting for ages to get released by the PFL. But the upshot of that is we have a man who's lost a year and a half of his prime, which is scandalous when you think about it. But from a purely technical standpoint, that's a massive, massive advantage if you're Lerone Murphy. You know, Lerone Murphy has fought 3 times in the UFC, that Barboza fight, the Ige fight, the Josh Emmett fight. And each one's gone to a decision. He's had 45 minutes of Octagon time since Aaron Pico last fought, and that was outside of the UFC. So that is a major factor that needs to be taken into account in this fight. And also, these aren't scrubs that Lerone Murphy's fighting. He's fighting guys who are dangerous men in their weight class. And in terms of like Emmett was a guy who, had he got past Lerone Murphy in that fight, would have been knocking on the door of a title fight. So these are big fights. And now Pico's got a step from a year and a half or more than a year and a half away straight into it. And if he wins, he needs to be lauded to the heavens for that fact alone, let alone the fact that he will have beat Lerone Murphy for the first time in the Brit's career. So really fascinating matchup of how this fight plays out. Tactically and technically, I think Murphy is outstanding. I think you look at Pico, he might have the edge when it comes to fight finishing ability. We don't know, because Pico hasn't fought the very, very elite yet. He's been just bubbling under at Bellator. Now he's in the UFC and he's with Murphy, who they're just below the very, very top guys. Whoever wins this is probably going to find themselves in a title eliminator next. So it's a really important fight for the division. It's a big fight for Aaron Pico making his UFC debut. And it's a big opportunity for Lerone Murphy. You know, Pico might not be a recognized UFC name, but in MMA circles, Aaron Pico has always been respected as a seriously legit athletic talent and someone who at his best has the ability to become a world champion. So really looking forward to this fight. As I say, there's no belt on the line for this. It might not even be a title eliminator. It could be. It might not, though. But that doesn't diminish the quality of this fight and the stakes at play, and just the different routes to the same point that these two fighters have had to take. Really excited by this fight. Really looking forward to seeing how it pans out. It's going to be a cracker at featherweight, 145 pounds, the co-main event at UFC 319, Lerone Murphy versus Aaron Pico. We talk about pay-per-view UFC events, and this one still is a pay-per-view, despite the news we gave you a little bit earlier in the show. You always want good, strong, fan-friendly fights leading up to the big ones at the very top of the card. And we've got an absolute cracker at 170 pounds. Geoff Neal versus Carlos Prates. Geoff Neal, been in the UFC for a while now, always in good fights. Sometimes they go his way, sometimes they don't. Invariably, they're fun to watch. And his last time out, he picked up a win over Rafael Dos Anjos. Unfortunate way he got the win, insofar as Dos Anjos picked up a knee injury. Didn't get to see all of Geoff Neal in that fight as a result of that, but nonetheless, that was a crucial win for him. He'd previously lost a split decision to Ian Machado Gary, and then prior to that, he'd been subbed by Shavkat Rakhmonov, who is obviously out of action at the moment. Hopefully, we'll see him towards the end of this year, fingers crossed. But for Geoff Neal, getting that win over Rafael Dos Anjos was absolutely crucial. He's now back in the win column, and he's now got Carlos Prates, who himself is looking to bounce back, having lost his own decision to Ian Machado Gary. Machado Gary featuring in both these guys' resumes, having beaten the pair of them. But Prates, from the Fighting Nerds, had an incredible run into the UFC, earned his place in the UFC through Dana White's Contender Series, then won 4 in a row in the UFC before eventually being outpointed by Machado Gary, who I still don't think gets the credit he deserves for just how good that man is. But there you go. That's for another time. But Carlos Prates, super exciting. You think about those 4 wins he had prior to that. Ian Machado Gary loss, all wins by knockout. Trevin Giles, knockout. Charlie Radke, Chuck Buffalo, knockout to the body. Li Jingliang, knockout. Neil Magny, who doesn't get knocked out that often, knockout. He's an absolute beast. I got to meet him and chat to him during Fight Week, International Fight Week. Absolutely top bloke as well. Hard not to root for the guy, having met him and spoken to him. A really great character, but also super chilled, super respectful. But you put him in a cage, all he wants to do is just light people up. And going in there with someone like Geoff Neal, who loves nothing better than to stand and trade himself, this is going to be one for the fans. This is going to be a cracker with the perfect hors d'oeuvre for what we're going to see later in the evening in the main event. It's this one. This one has got potential fight of the night written on it. It really does. In the welterweight division, this isn't going to determine the next title contender. It isn't even going to determine the next title challenger after the next title challenger. But I think what this does is gives Prates a chance to bounce back into the win column and get himself into another big fight later this year. For Geoff Neal, it's a chance to re-establish himself once again and start stacking wins in his own resume. So super exciting fight at 170 pounds. Geoff Neal versus Carlos Prates. We have another man who is a serious talent at 170 pounds. So good that nobody at 170 pounds wants to fight him. Certainly no one with a number next to their name. Michael Venom Page, another one of these guys who's fought in Bellator, been an absolute superstar, come across to the UFC, but he has done great things in the UFC so far. The only thing we haven't seen from him is a finish. We haven't seen a finish yet, but Michael Venom Page is certainly box office whenever he fights. He's always entertaining when he fights. And he, after his last fight, he moved up to middleweight and took on Shara Bullet Magomedov in a fight that some people thought was absolutely nuts for him to take. I personally predicted him to win that fight. I just thought that, his fighting style and Magomedov's fighting style was tailor-made for MVP, and it kind of played out that way. The only thing that wasn't at the end of that fight was a finish. MVP did everything else bar finish the guy. But great performance from Michael Venom Page at middleweight. And we thought, okay, he's moved up to middleweight just to keep himself ticking over, to keep himself active while they sort out a legit opponent for him at 170 pounds. Well, no takers. No takers for MVP at 170. So guess what? He's staying at 185 pounds. He's back at 185 pounds and he's taking on a man who not all that long ago was fighting for the undisputed middleweight championship of the world. Jared Cannonier, just a couple of years ago, was challenging Israel Adesanya for the middleweight title. Actually, July 2022, 3 years ago, for the undisputed middleweight title back at UFC 276. He's been in there with Adesanya, Sean Strickland, Marvin Vettori, Imavov, Baralho, and Gregory Rodriguez. Now he's going to get in there with Michael Venom Page. And I think this is going to be a great matchup. I really do. I think you look at the way this fight lines up stylistically. I think this is set up for another big MVP performance. I really do. Cannonier is as tough as old boots. He's fought at heavyweight. He's fought at light heavyweight. Now he's down at middleweight, and he looks like $1 million at middleweight. He looks like he's cut from granite. He looks phenomenal. And he lost a couple in a row. He got stopped by Nassourdine Imavov, who is now the #1 contender at 185 pounds. He lost the decision to Caio Borralho, who maybe is the next guy in line at 185 pounds. But he bounced back against a very, very tough, very, very difficult to stop Gregory Rodriguez, and he stopped him. He stopped him in the 4th round of their main event back in February at the UFC Apex. That was a big, big win for Jared Cannonier. And now he gets to fight Michael Venom Page. A fight arguably that doesn't have a huge amount of upside for Cannonier just because MVP has no cachet at 185 pounds. In terms of his ranking, he's not ranked. So how does this work out? He's just got to go in there and really sort of stamp his authority, say, look, this is middleweight, this is my division, off you go back to 170. But MVP, despite being the man moving up in weight, will be the taller man, will have the bigger reach, and he'll also have the speed advantage as well. He has a speed advantage over almost everybody he fights. But as he moves up in weight, that speed advantage looks even better. And against a guy who you look at Cannonier. Cannonier will walk forward and try and knock you out, control pressure, nothing too outlandish. He doesn't overextend himself. Fight's very compact, but he's strong everywhere. You got MVP will just beckon him on, will welcome Cannonier to walk forward, and the minute Cannonier gets into range, you can see MVP just pot shotting him and being very mobile and doing MVP things. This is going to be a really interesting fight because Cannonier has only been stopped 3 times in his entire career. And as I say, he's fought a heavyweight, he's fought a light heavyweight, he's fought a middleweight. And he's beaten the likes of Israel Adesanya, who can finish people with ease. Adesanya had to go to the scorecards with him in a title fight. So we'll see how this one goes. It could be Cannonier just overpowers MVP over the 3 rounds. But MVP, if he gets a lead on the scorecards, if he just does what he does, starts bouncing on those toes, starts sticking and moving and scoring, before you know it, you're a round down, and then you're chasing a fight. And you don't want to be chasing a fight against someone like Michael Venom Page. So I'm really looking forward to this. I think as a UK person and someone who's followed MVP's career from way back when, I'm looking forward to seeing MVP at middleweight. I think this could be a really good spot for him. If he wins this fight, all of a sudden we could see a route towards championship contention for him in a new weight class at 185 pounds. In a weight class that he's looking for new contenders potentially. So we'll see how this one goes. It's going to be an exciting one. That is on the main card at UFC 319 at 185 pounds. Jared Cannonier against Michael Venom Page. All right, and the very first fight on the pay-per-view main card on Saturday night, UFC 319, it's the flyweights, Tim Elliott versus Kai Asakura. A real clash of styles here. 2 guys who I think are going to put on a great fight. And it really is going to be a case of who can cope with the other guy's good stuff the best. Tim Elliott is scrappy. He's just a pain in the backside to fight. He will get in your face. He'll throw punches to get into range. He'll drag you to the mat. And then he'll look to bust you up on the floor and work his way towards a submission. Kai Asakura, meanwhile, is just in there for one thing. He wants to separate you from your consciousness. He's very good at it. Former Rizin bantamweight champion, now fighting at 125 pounds. Took on the test of going for the world title on his Octagon debut. That's a big ask against Alexander Pantoja on your UFC debut, stepping in and challenging for the belt. Fell short on that occasion against a guy who I think people are now beginning to respect as one of the top 3 pound-for-pound fighters in the world right now, Pantoja. Asakura fell short on that occasion, but he's now been through the process now. He's had that UFC debut and he's had the pressure of being the last fight of the night on a UFC pay-per-view, or second to last fight of the night as it would have been on a UFC pay-per-view. Now he's got Tim Elliott on the very first fight of a UFC pay-per-view main card. I think this is a great opportunity for him to bounce back against a guy who is not going to be difficult to find in the Octagon. The thing he's going to have to do is just keep that distance, because Elliott will look to close that distance and suffocate that space and not let Asakura get anything off. We're going to see Asakura really tested. I think we're going to see him pushed up against the fence really early, and Elliott's really going to look to grind on him in that opening round and really try and take the gas out of him in the opening 2.5 minutes of the fight. If Asakura can break free of that and start to let his shots go, then Elliott could be in trouble. But real clash of styles, this one. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that one pans out. Asakura is a dangerous man at bantamweight. At flyweight, assuming the weight cut goes well and everything's fine and he's healthy and he replenishes well, he's an absolute monster at 125 pounds. So that's the opening fight on the pay-per-view main card, UFC 319, Tim Elliott versus Kai Asakura at flyweight. Whoever wins that is going to find themselves probably a fight or 2 away from title contention. So we'll see how that one pans out. Elliott, can he grind down Kai Asakura for the win, or will Asakura claim his first stoppage win and his first victory in the UFC? Let's find out together on Saturday night, UFC 319. That's your main card for UFC 319 in Chicago. The time for that for us here in the UK, usual start time, 3 a.m. Set your alarm, get a tactical sleep in, whatever it is you need to do. Make sure you're up and at it for that main card. As I say, only one title fight on the card, but that whole main card is full of bangers. That should be a really entertaining night of fights once the pay-per-view portion of the event kicks in. But some decent stuff on the prelims as well. Kicking off at 1 a.m. on UFC Fight Pass and on TNT Sports/Discovery Plus here in the UK. We have King Green versus Diego Ferreira at lightweight. Two real vets of the game going head-to-head at 155 pounds. At middleweight, we've got grappler versus striker Gerald Meerschaert versus Mikhail Alexichuk. Look out for Alexichuk's body shots. I love his body shots. They are outstanding. He's left hook to the body. He's one of the best in the UFC. Love watching that man fight. Meerschaert is a monster when he gets his opponents on the mat. So if Alexichuk keeps it standing, could be a painful night for Meerschaert. If Meerschaert gets it to the mat, Alexichuk's in trouble. So real clash of styles at 185 pounds, United States versus Poland, Meerschaert versus Alexichuk. We have a ranked strawweight matchup between number 5, Jessica Andrade versus 11th ranked Lupi Godinez of Mexico. Andrade is now finding herself in that unenviable gatekeeper sort of role at strawweight. It feels like she's had that time where she was challenging for championships. Now she's just dropped a little bit beneath that. And now she's finding herself having to defend her ranking against fighters on the way up. And Godinez is one of those fighters who's, tough and gritty and is prepared to sort of do whatever's necessary to win that fight, take it to the mat, stand and bang. It doesn't matter to her. She will go through. And she's had a few bloody wars in the Octagon already. Jessica Andrade is just all power. She's tiny. Even at strawweight, she's small. But she is absolutely power-packed, and she's still got the striking power to put anybody in big trouble at 115 pounds. That's going to be an interesting one. Further down the card at lightweight, Chase Hooper, who we've seen grow up in the UFC. He's not a skinny kid anymore. He's now really starting to fill out into his frame, and is showing some decent mat skills as he does so, taking on Alexander Hernandez, who blows a bit hot and cold in the UFC. When he's good, he's really good, but sometimes his performances have dropped off. He'll need to be at his best against Chase Hooper this weekend when they go to war at 155. Also at lightweight, Edson Barboza taking on Drakkar Klose. Klose, another one who's been in the UFC for a while, shared the cage with a load of big names. Tough guy, won a few, lost a few. Edson Barboza, an absolute vet. One of the bigger name fighters in the UFC who hasn't captured championship gold. He will always be on the UFC's highlight reel for that knockout of Terry Etim, that incredible spinning wheel kick of Terry Etim. But that is far from his only highlight reel knockout. Look at the man's highlight reel. Go on YouTube, just watch Edson Barboza finishes, and you'll just be blown away by the amount of incredible finishes. His kicks are some of the nastiest you'll see in any combat sport, let alone mixed martial arts. So. And he's still going strong. He still looks in $1 million in terms of his physique. He's fighting as well as he ever has. He'll be one to watch on the preliminary card this weekend. And kicking off the televised prelims, Brian Battle versus Nursultan Ruziboyev. This is another sleeper for fight of the night. Ruziboyev is tough and gritty and will get in there and just throw down with anybody. Brian Battle has shown some real talent in his last few fights, and will fight through anything as well. That, for me, they might not be the two biggest names on the fight card, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if one of those two guys ends up going home with either a performance of the night bonus, or maybe both of them going home with a fight of the night bonus. Mark that one in your card as one you don't want to miss. That's actually the second bout of the night based on the UFC fight card on the official UFC website right now. Early prelims just have one fight listed. Karine Silva versus JJ Aldrich. Ranked fighters in the women's flyweight division going head-to-head. Brazil's Karine Silva ranked 11th. JJ Aldrich ranked 14th. Karine looking to move her way up into contention. JJ, who has been in a division for ages, always a difficult fighter to deal with, tends to drag things out to a decision. Karine likes to get finishes. Let's see how this one goes, kicking off the night at 125 pounds. That is your fight card for UFC 319, Du Plessis versus Chimaev. As I say, early prelims kick off at 11 p.m. on UFC Fight Pass. The televised prelims kick off at 1 a.m. on UFC Fight Pass and TNT Sports/Discovery Plus here in UK. Main card, TNT Sports and Discovery Plus from 3 a.m. Big night on Saturday night with the UFC. Looking forward to that one. But that isn't the only action we have in the world of mixed martial arts this weekend. Let's bring you up to date on what's coming up, as well as the UFC this weekend. Saturday night might be UFC night this weekend, but on Friday night, we've got the perfect lead-in. The PFL World Tournament Finals continue this weekend. We've got the lightweights, we've got the women's flyweights, we've got the bantamweights. All finals being decided on Friday night at the PFL World Tournament. At 155 pounds in the main event, Russia's Gadzhi Rabadanov taking on England's Alfie Davis. Alfie Davis, the Axeman, someone who's worked his way up through Bellator, just below championship level, always was really, really close, couldn't quite make that breakthrough. Now he's in a tournament final. Politics have not stopped him. He's in a tournament format. He's just gone win and advance, and he's won and he's advanced. He beat former Bellator champion Brent Primus in the semi-finals to get to the final where he takes on Rabadanov, already a PFL champion, of course, Gadzhi Rabadanov, and one of the more talented guys under the PFL banner. He'll face Alfie Davis for the tournament championship and $500,000 in that lightweight final. That is the main event, 5-minute rounds for the PFL lightweight tournament title. Where's it taking place? The Bojangles Coliseum in Charlotte, North Carolina. There you go, Charlotte, North Carolina. And the co-main event will be the flyweights. Liz Carmouche, Bellator champion as was, looking to add a PFL title to her name. She takes on Jenna Bishop in the women's flyweight finals. Carmouche has a huge experience advantage. Carmouche has a unique record of being the very first female fighter to ever set foot into the UFC Octagon. I know Ronda Rousey is the one that everyone talks about. Ronda Rousey was the red corner. Liz Carmouche was the blue corner. She got in the cage first. And do you know what? She wasn't all that far off beating Ronda Rousey in that fight before Ronda eventually turned the tables and got that infamous armbar finish that then sent her off into the stratosphere. But Liz Carmouche was a legit contender then, and she's been a legit contender ever since. Now, fighting at 125 pounds rather than the 135 pounds she was fighting at back then. She's gone on, become a Bellator champion, defended her belt. Now, here she is under the PFL banner. She's made it all the way to the championship finale in the PFL World Tournament. She takes on Jenna Bishop, who 9-2 as a professional, made her way through the tournament to the final, looking to claim the biggest scalp of her career as she looks to claim championship gold and that cool $500,000 first prize in that tournament. The other tournament championship fight is at bantamweight. Macaulay Alvarez taking on Justin Wetzel at 135 pounds. Fun fight this. Alvarez did really, really well to get to the final last time out. He's 14-4 as a professional, and he went in there with Jake Hadley, put on a great performance in a fight that Hadley was expected to win. Alvarez really did do a great job. He beat Leandro Higo by split decision earlier on in the tournament to get himself through to the semi-finals. Beats Jake Hadley convincingly in the semi-finals on the scorecards, and he'll take on Justin Wetzel, who, because Kasum Kasimov, he beats Kasum Kasimov. He failed to make weight. Just looking at this, he failed to make weight. He came in 2.4 pounds over the bantamweight limit of 136. So he's slightly fortunate in that he was allowed to continue in the tournament, but he did. Beats Kasimov by decision, then took on Mando Gutierrez. No issues on the scale for that one. Made sure he was 100% on weight and ready. Beats Gutierrez on the scorecards. Now he takes on Alves. Both guys happy to grind it out to the scorecard. This one could go the duration for the bantamweight title. Life-changing sum of money for the winner. Will it be Alves from Brazil? Will it be Wetzel from the United States? Also on that fight card, Mads Burnell, big fan of Mads Burnell. Anybody who's watched his fights, he's always entertaining to watch. Loves that Philly shell boxing style, but he's got good submissions as well. Great personality, Mads Burnell as well, taking on Robert Watley. Juliana Velasquez, one of the best women's flyweights on the planet still, taking on Ekaterina Shakalova. Biagio Ali Walsh looking to bounce back from his first career loss as a professional, taking on Adrian Grundy. And the PFL debut of Sabrina De Souza. And if you don't know Sabrina De Souza, get used to the name because she is a potential champion of the future. the most decorated female fighter in amateur MMA history, an absolute superstar in IMAF, fought for Brave, representing the Kingdom of Bahrain. She's from Brazil, living and training in Bahrain, representing the team based out there. She's stepping into the PFL Smart Cage for the very first time against 15-fight Sarai Orozco. She's 8-7 as a pro. Sabrina is 3-0 as a pro, but with an unbelievable amateur record in her back pocket as well. Definitely one to watch, and someone whose progression I think we need to follow very closely. And she may well be part of the PFL World Tournament next year at 125 pounds. Potentially, they might see her making a similar path through that we saw from Dakota Dicheva. I think Sabrina De Sousa, a very different type of fighter to Dakota Dicheva, but someone who I think if her progression continues in the same sort of rate, she could make a similar rise, although in a different style to Dakota. So one to watch out for, Sabrina De Sousa on the prelims there at PFL World Tournament Championships 2, because we've already seen the first batch of finals already. Just looking further down, you've got Renat Kavalov versus Vilson Endrajoni, Kennedy St. Louis versus Chris Mixon, Damian Nelson versus Isaiah Diggs. That is your full fight card for Friday night at the Bojangles Coliseum, Charlotte, North Carolina, the PFL World Finals. Dan Hardy on commentary with Sean O'Connell. Always must listen television. Love listening to Dan Hardy. Breaks down fights unlike anybody else in the world. I think he's the best in the business at it. He's so good. And looking forward to that. That should be an absolutely cracking night of fights. Leads in perfectly to UFC 319 on Saturday night. And it should be a good night of mixed martial arts. And if you like your boxing, your heavyweight boxing, Moses Itama from just down the road from me in Chatham, Kent. Teenage sensation and someone who has been tipped to rule the heavyweight landscape in the years ahead, taking on Dillian Whyte. This is a real acid test for Moses Itama. If he can do to Dillian Whyte what he's been doing to his past opponents, then he's going to be very hard to ignore. And even though he's still so young in his career, there's going to be a real challenge not putting him in these big title fights, because if you can beat Dillian Whyte, you're in that top level of heavyweights, and you're in there with either a champion or a former champion. And then you beat one of them, you're either holding a belt or you're challenging for a belt next. So that's also must-see TV this weekend. So we've got the PFL, we've got heavyweight boxing, and we've got the UFC. It is a big, busy weekend of combat sports, and we absolutely love it. Thanks for checking out the RDX Sports Podcast. As always, give us a follow on the socials. I am at Simon Head Sport on all social platforms. RDX Sports is the handle for X/Twitter, whatever you want to call it. RDX_sports on Instagram. And most importantly of all, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you never miss an episode of the RDX Sports Podcast. Thank you so much, as always, for checking out the show this week. Looking forward to the fights this weekend. Should be a superb few days of combat sports entertainment. And enjoy those fights, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll be back to chat through it all next week.